Hello and happy Saturday. I'm Brendan Smith with Batdorf and Bronson Coffee Roasters, coming to you live from our Florida training lab. You can see behind me. Today we're going to have a quick conversation about roasting. So if you've ever had an interest in roasting at home, what makes the coffee that we roast at Batdorf and Bronson so special, we're going to kind of dig into that today. I've actually pre-recorded some video of a roasting experiment that I did, and I'm going to show you that video along with a conversation that I had with Bob Benk, who is our green coffee buyer. So I'm going to give you just a minute to tune in. Let's take a look at the coffees that we've got on deck today. Hey everybody, got our Dancing Goats blend, and we've got La Manita Costa Rica Tarasu. If you want a discount, I can get you a discount. How's that sound? Right there, Watch and Learn 10. Watch and Learn 10. You use that coupon on our website, and we'll save you 10%. All right? We'll get the video going in just a second. So say hi in the comments. If you're tuning in, I want to say hi to you. Let's take a look at those comments. And I'll be following along in the comments while we show the video too, to kind of chat with you and answer your questions and all that good stuff. All right. So we'll give it just a minute before we start the presentation, as it were. And I appreciate you guys tuning in. I'll pull up the chat so I can hang out with you. Okay. Looks like we are live and broadcasting. So we're going to go ahead. Oops. We're going to go ahead and start that video now. So this is my adventures with home roasting. And I hope you find it fun and interesting. And then I will move from there into my conversation with Bob. Don't forget to check us out online at batdorfcoffee.com. Check out the Batdorf Boosters VIP Coffee Club. That's the best place to get discounts, coupons, tips, previews of upcoming coffees. We've got all of that there in the group. And You can pick up stuff like our steeped coffee, which is an awesome product to take with you when you're traveling and camping. It's completely compostable, awesome single serve option. And then of course, as I said earlier, we've got that 10% off. So use the code WatchAndLearn10 at batdorfcoffee.com to save 10%. And we appreciate you being with us and hanging in there. So I'm just going to wait just a second here, other folks to join, and then we'll start the video. All right, leave me a comment, let me know what you think, and enjoy my struggle. Here we go. Hey guys, Brendan with Batdorf and Bronson Coffee Roasters. We're going to do a quick little roasting demo using a popcorn popper. Today I have our Burundi coffee. You can find all our coffee, batdorfcoffee.com. This is the coffee expertly roasted in our roastery. And I'm going to take some of this green and I'm going to roast it for you right now. So, first thing I'm going to do, if you want to come over here and take a look, is I'm going to take my little popcorn popper. This is just an air popper. You have to get the right kind. Not every single one will work. I'm going to turn it on. And now that it's spinning, what I want to do is I want to put my green in and we'll get a right top-down shot. I want to pour it in here until the weight of the coffee prevents it from spinning. So if I put a few beans in, they spin, they spin, they spin. They're still spinning. They're slowing down. They're slowing down, but they're still spinning. Slowing down. That's about there. Okay, now that they're not spinning on their own, I want to spin them. So I've got my wooden stirrer. And if you want to take a look here, what you're doing is you're keeping it moving as the chaff flies off. This is why we're doing this outside. It's very messy. Now look at it, it's spinning on its own because it's losing mass as it's heating up. Now that it's light enough that it can spin, it won't burn. If I hadn't stirred it previously, it would have burned right away. So that's why we want to keep it moving, moving, moving. Now what we're going to do is we're going to watch it and we're going to listen. And you can see this chaff flying everywhere. It's a real mess. While we wait for that, got a few of our coffees. This is our Sumatra Menhaling, truffle, cedar, and clove. Also got our 100% certified organic Bolivia Buena Vista, pecan nougat molasses. This is a really sweet coffee, simple origin. And our shade-grown 100% certified organic Whirling Dervish blend, molasses, chocolate, and cherry. This is a great one. Brewed coffee or espresso. Okay, bring it back in. Let's take a look. You can see the colors starting to change. What I'm listening for now is what's called first crack. I want to hear the explosion as the shell of the coffee bean kind of bursts. While we're here, I'm going to take you through the process. This is what the beans look like initially. This is as they dry out in the roasting process. This is the completely green, sorry. So 0, 1, 2. This is as they get a little darker, which is about where we're at now. This is as it's called full yellow. This is the beginning of the Maillard phase. The Maillard reaction is what happens when sugars interact with heat. It's what gets you a crust on your steak. It's what gets you that char in your vegetables. So furthering the Maillard phase, we get a little darker. This is about near first crack. And that's what we're hearing right now, that pop, pop, pop. This is further development. And here's the end of a roast. And so that gives you just an idea, if I fan these out a little bit, of how the coffee develops in a very short period of time. So now that we're hearing this crack, we're almost done. I got chaff all over me. This is going to happen very quickly. I'm smelling it. the popcorn popping, the crack. It's slowing down. So now I'm going to dump it. I'm going to grab the corner, and as it's spinning, zoom in here, and pour it right out. And the reason, now we can turn it off. The reason we didn't turn it off beforehand is because the reason we didn't turn it off initially is because it would have burned. So keeping it spinning, keeping it moving as we dumped it out kept everything from burning. So you can come in close. This coffee is cooling, it's very hot. There's a little chaff that blew into this that has nothing to do with this, but you can tell the difference here between the coffee that was roasted by our roasters and the coffee that I just roasted. Mine's a little more uneven. You see that blonde bean and then some darker beans that are a little too dark. The only thing that's bad in here is chaff that blew over from my roast. Otherwise, it's very even. Mine is more uneven because I struggled to control that heat. So that's a little bit about home roasting. We're gonna chat with Bob and talk about that some more. But it's starting to rain here, so I'm gonna run inside. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you soon. Have a good one. Bye. Okay, so that was fun. What an experience. That was my third time roasting what you saw in video there on that little popcorn popper. The first one came out terrible. I didn't try it. The second one looked better. I still didn't try it. I did try the coffee from that third roast, and I was pleasantly surprised. It definitely, well, I'll talk about it a little bit more in my conversation with Bob. It definitely didn't have the same dimension that the coffees that are roasted in the roastery have. But, you know, it was fun. It's like any activity that you do at home. It's interesting and it's fun to experiment, to try something out. Now, I was lucky enough to be able to use really good green from Batdorf and Bronson. Unfortunately, we don't sell that to the public. So that was definitely an advantage that I had going in. But even so, from a consistency standpoint, I couldn't possibly pull off what our roasters can at the roastery using that little popcorn popper. But it was a lot of fun, definitely a neat experience. So now I'd like to go to a conversation I had with Bob, who is our green buyer, who's in charge of our coffee program, and really he's the one who knows more about how we roast our coffee than just about anyone. So hang tight, and I'll meet you guys in the comments. We'll chat a little bit with Bob. Here we go. Okay. Hey, Bob.
Good afternoon, Brendan.
How are you today, sir?
Doing great. Friday, another gorgeous Friday here in Olympia.
Yeah, it's hot, but not too bad in St. Pete. So thanks for joining us today.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, looking forward to seeing what you got cooking there. Obviously, we're going to have some discussion here about some home roasting. And I guess, like I started to tell you earlier, there was a time where I knew more about some of the different options that are out there. And it was a while ago, and I'm sure the technology's changed. However, why don't you tell me a little about what you got going on there? What machine did you?
So for my home roasting experiment, I went with the venerable popcorn popper, little air popper. And because of the way it vents and spins, it's able to kind of keep the coffee moving and let the chaff exit. So it works. So I roasted some coffee.
what sort, do you have a heat or airflow control on that?
Nope.
Push button and go,
Push
and
the
just
button and go.
see what you get. Okay.
So what I do is I load in enough coffee to where it's too heavy for the popper to spin it. Because as you put coffee in there, it starts spinning, right? And the bottom. And so I just keep pouring coffee in until it freezes up. It can't move anymore. And not much past that point. And then I take my little wooden paddle and I stir it to keep it moving because I don't want to burn it until the coffee has lost enough mass that the machine can move it on its own again. And then I just sort of let it go and watch it. And when it's done, tip it out while it's still spinning so that there's no moment that the coffee's not moving. And that's how you roast on.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a pretty basic machine. There are more technical machines out there. There's stuff that people are using in it for home use that's very similar to what perhaps I use in my lab for sample testing, more of a drum style roaster with heat and airflow control. So once again, technology can change. But in this instance, yeah, it's pretty basic. It's a push button and go. And I know when we talked earlier, you did do this outside. Do you want to maybe talk about the advantage of doing that?
Well, it's messy, Bob. So as I'm roasting, you basically have two options. You can put the lid on and you can kind of put a bowl of water. You can hope for the best. Or you can just go outside and let the wind do the job. But as you're roasting, a lot of this chaff is just sort of blowing off, and you can see it on the coffee here that I have. There's quite a bit of it in there. And so that's got to go somewhere. And the easiest way to not make a mess is to just do it outside. So that's what that's why I do it that way.
I think this is the cautionary tale that I relay to people about home roasters is it's smoky, it's smelly.
Yes.
We have specialized equipment in our facilities that mitigate smoke and smell. We're required by law to have these. Granted, the quantity or the mass of coffee is much different. We're doing a lot more than you would put in any of these home roasting machines. But the bottom line is it's still a smoky process. And you did mention you loaded it down with green and you kind of kept it moving until it lost some of its mass. So people may or may not know this, but yeah, green coffee loses a lot of weight during the roasting process. It loses a lot of moisture content. Typically, green coffee comes in somewhere in the neighborhood of 10.5% to 12% water throughout that roasting process. That water is going to turn to steam, and it's going to want to escape from the bean. And when it does that, you release a lot of these other particulates that need to be dealt with as well. So there is equipment that goes beyond just the roaster itself that helps all these things work properly. Something to be aware of. You don't want to do this in your apartment with the windows closed and things get out of control fast. I think you also had a fire extinguisher nearby.
I did keep a fire extinguisher nearby. I felt that was a best practice situation to just be on the safe side, because I know that chaff is flammable. So
yeah, and I think just everything eventually can be flammable if you heat it up enough. So all right. So tell me about your experience here.
Interesting. So we roasted 2 coffees. We're using our Burundi. I roasted a batch of naturally processed coffee and a batch of wash. I'm going to turn the camera toward the coffees here and see if I can kind of show you. You see those okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is on the far end there, the roasted coffee. The one probably at the top of your screen or on my left is the natural. The one on the right is the washed.
That's correct.
And then you've got the green, same thing, which we were talking earlier. It's really amazing how different they appear just with the different processing.
Yeah, and visually for me right now, just looking at that, you can see the natural process, which is on the top of the screen for me, and I assume any viewers, has a yellowish hue to it. The bottom or washed Burundi, like Brendan, you said, these are both the Burundi Gahahi, the washed version of which we are currently offering still. The bottom or washed version is more that kind of deep jade green color.
Right. Yeah, and then down here I have the home roasted version. So a couple of things. I roasted a couple of batches over a couple of different weeks. This one is the natural, and this one is the washed. I found that my batch size was extremely limited. Basically, to do this and not have it go wildly inconsistent, the most I could roast in this popcorn popper was about 35 grams.
Okay.
So that's enough to make coffee for 2 people once. When I tried to load it up a little bit more, as I did, and so I gave you an example of each kind of. This one I kind of kept it a little lighter. The chaff that's in here is actually from this one. It just sort of blew over. And then this washed one, I loaded it just a little bit more, and you can see how much less consistent it is. Neither one of them's great. I'll compare, this is the same coffee roasted by Batdorf. It's a lot lighter. It's just more consistent all around. And then the washed, the same thing. There's just a lot of variation in these beans. What I found was that, I'll flip you back up so we can see each other. What I found was that it really happens quickly. Like, I watched every tutorial I could find before I used this thing, because I hadn't used it before. I knew about it, but I hadn't used it. And all the times people gave me that it should take, I cut those in half or less because the coffee just really got away from me quickly. So the first batch I roasted, I wish I had brought it with me, was just so dark. It was twice as dark. And I roasted it for 75% of the time I was supposed to.
Yeah.
So it moves really quick. And as soon as that first crack kind of ends, it really changes quickly. It was really like accelerating quickly. So I kind of figured out that I needed to pull it fast to get there. But it still doesn't. It still doesn't.
Well, not typically speaking. Yeah, and typically speaking, when and I had our production roast curve sent to you, so you could kind of see how the heat application, and you may or may not notice, but a lot of those markers that are on that curve are when we're basically turning burners off and we're reducing the amount of heat that we give the coffee. Once you get to that first crack phase or stage, you really do need to back off the gas. And that's something that you probably don't have the option of doing on your little air roaster there, correct?
No, I don't have any real control. Let me pull one of those roast curves up so we can take a look at it. So this is the one for the natural that you sent over. Do you want to talk through that a little bit?
It's real small, so it's hard for me to see. But generally speaking, when you load a coffee into a roasting machine, you can see that initial dip, right? So you start up at a certain temperature, certain charge temperature, or what the ambient temperature of the drum is when you add green coffee to it. Initially, the temperature goes down. You get to that little trough there at the bottom of the curve that we call T1, or the lowest temperature that you're going to experience. And then, your temp slowly climbs back up as that green coffee absorbs heat from the drum. And you get into those other phases of the roast, like first crack and so on. So that's generally what that curve should look like. And like I said, each of those little markers on there is when somebody was either turning a burner on or turning a burner off, in order to make that curve fit what we've determined is kind of the target for what we want to do. I think everybody that's ever spoken to one of our roasters or been on a tour of one of our facilities, these curves, it's just data collection. It's not a control. It's not a PID control for the machine. Everything is still done at the discretion of the roaster person. We just record these so that we have them for reference after the fact. The more tools you have, the better. And this roast curve is just one of the tools that we use to maintain consistency in our roasting, and use as a training tool from roaster person to roaster person, and also the consistency between the roasteries. The machines we have in Olympia and Atlanta, although set up similarly, are different machines, and those temperatures are going to be different. They're going to change. And it's something that I'm always really hesitant to tell somebody, oh yeah, you should charge this at 360 degrees. 360 degrees on the Atlanta roasting machine is different than 360 degrees on your home air roaster.
Sure.
It's just the way these temperature probes read things is there can be a lack of consistency there. So I say it with caution. Just don't put too much stock in a specific temperature when you're either starting or finishing a roast. If someone says, I had someone tell me one time, they're like, oh, we finished this up around 415 degrees. And there was a time where if you went up to 415 degrees in our roasting machine, at least according to what the temperature probe was saying, you're going to get something really, really smoky at the end of that roast. So the cautionary tale of temperatures. I will say that the one consistent measure, regardless of what machine you're on, is time, right? 30 seconds is 30 seconds here at my kitchen table, just like 30 seconds is going to be down in the lab on the sample roaster. So time is something that I think we can talk about from person or machine to machine. And I think this is a challenge you said you were definitely having with that machine is the time parameter. So that's a pretty good example of how time has a huge impact on cup quality.
Well, I can tell you just doing a dry sniff, the big difference between the coffee that was roasted at the roastery and the coffee that was air popped is development. There's just this coffee is just flatter, the coffee that I roasted. It doesn't have the kind of, even just in the dry sniff, it just doesn't have that depth and sweetness. It smells it smells kind of like a one-dimensional version of that same coffee. And I think time might be a contributing factor to that. I couldn't stretch it out. That thing gets as hot as it gets, and it's capable of roasting, right? Because it gets hot enough and it moves air around, and anything that can do that could theoretically roast coffee. But I could not throttle that heat and that airflow. So I think it's like trying to barbecue quickly. It's not a good thing. Like there's no, I don't think there was enough time to really develop those kind of nuanced roasty flavors that we're looking for.
Yeah.
I'm going to grab the water while you speak to that. All right.
Yeah, so that, in essence, is that flavor development or that sugar, that caramelization development or process that you're referring to is in essence what makes coffee roasting, right? It's that time versus temperature curve and how fast or slow you do things. And everybody has different ideas about what that should be, and every coffee has a particular window that perhaps it performs better in. So everyone's got a way. We have our way. We have different approaches, like I said, to different coffees. And I think in this instance specifically, looking at the same coffee from the same processing mill that's just a full natural process versus a fully washed coffee. And we're going to have different approaches to those. And because those coffees are going to perform differently in a roasting environment.
Right.
And I think that's definitely something you experienced when you were roasting those coffees.
For sure. For sure, I did. It's amazing the difference that made. And if for those that are watching this, we talk about processing. Processing coffee is just how we remove the coffee bean, which is a seed, from the fruit, right? The fruit is called a coffee cherry. Yep. And so how we remove the coffee cherry from the seed, the coffee bean, is called processing. And generally, most coffees use water to mechanically separate the fruit from the seed, and that's a wash process. Yeah. But there's also a natural process, which it's kind of the sun tea of coffee processing, where you allow the fruit to kind of allow the sun to kind of wither that fruit off of that seed, which leaves a little bit more of that mucilage behind and can kind of impart stronger, more fermenty, fruity kind of notes to the coffee, which can be really exciting and really delicious. And but it's amazing the difference that the same coffee processed both ways presents.
Yeah, so those coffees will actually, the cherry or the fruit will dry on the seed, and it will stay on there until it gets dry milled. Usually those coffees are stored in the pod of the cherry until you're getting ready to do dry milling for export. So and as one might suspect, it's a much fruitier cup profile. Sure. And as we saw, the greens themselves, after they do get dry milled and taken down to that cafe oro, or that green seed form, has a visually different appearance to it for sure.
Really different. I don't know if you guys could see that.
Can you stop? Are we still sharing screen? I'm just seeing the curve still up there.
Yeah, let me stop sharing the screen.
Okay, there we go. So those coffees ultimately act quite different in the roasting machine. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
You can see just how radically different the natural over here with the yellow versus this wash process that Bob described as that sort of jade green.
Yeah, my apologies. We do these broadcasts often, and I know I've talked a lot about differences in processing. So those are the two extremes, right? And then you have everything in between, which I think you kind of talked a little bit about there, like a demucilaged coffee or pulp natural,
Sure.
where you'll go and you might remove some of the cherry, but you leave the mucilage on the parchment and dry it that way. So people have really been doing a lot of experimenting with different, wet processing methods or dry processing methods. If these naturals, you can do how you dry them, how long you take with it. Do you do it in there's cold fermentation that occurs on some naturals. You can soak the cherries before you start drying it. There's lots of different things you can do to try and have control or impact ultimately on what that cup profile is going to look like.
I like all the euphemisms for the different processing names. Sugarcane processed and all these.
Honey process.
Honey process. There's no honey and there's no sugarcane in the processing.
No, there's not. But the Spanish word for mucilage often is referred to as miel, which can be loosely, interchangeable with or translated to honey. So I understand how that became a descriptor for, processing coffee.
Well, it also sounds better than the other things I could call them.
Yeah. Everybody likes honey. People don't necessarily get too excited about pulp natural, do they?
No, not so much.
But yeah, so but that's all stuff that happens at Origin. What we're doing as roasters is ultimately just trying to really preserve the inherent quality of this green coffee that we receive. I like to say I can't make that coffee taste better. I can only try and express the quality that's already there.
Sure.
And this is kind of my spiel that I do with employees and customers. If we're talking about that seed to cup, right? Everything that needs to happen at Origin and everything along that supply chain, and we're trying not to mess it up. Okay, right. Everybody's doing their job right, and if everybody does their job right, then when you slide that cup of coffee across the table to the end consumer, and they have that positive experience, then this is everybody doing their part in that supply chain to give people the best possible experience they can have. Yeah. And roasting is just one factor in that.
Right. It's amazing how long that chain is of not messing it up, right? You can have incredible green coffee that is processed poorly or transported poorly or whatever, certainly roasted or even brewed, right? We put our great coffee that's been lovingly cared for, and it gets down to being brewed, and somebody does it in such a way, they use water that's not very tasty, or they use a ratio that's not ideal for extraction, and you can end up with something that's astringent or bitter or sour that didn't need to be. So there's a lot to that process, and I think having that expert roasting is taking a big step toward ensuring that you start with a quality product, because you can't engineer and fix something that's already broken. You can't take bad coffee and make it good. You can only keep the coffee good, that was already taken care of.
Yeah, this is what you're describing is the miracle of coffee, Brendan. I still consider it a small miracle every day when I have coffee that all those conditions have been met, and it tastes great, with all the things that can potentially go wrong, of course.
Well, I'm gonna, so I've got this coffee in front of me, and I just need another cup. So I already broke it. I'm just gonna clean this up a little bit. We do cupping a lot on video, so we won't go over everything, but basically, I kind of think of cupping as the most neutral way to evaluate the coffee, right? Where we're not trying to, if you think of it as music, we're not throwing a lot of extra bass in there. We're not EQing it. We're just trying to taste everything that's in the coffee. And the purpose of that is from a production cupping. So, there's really two kinds of cuppings. You can cup green coffee as a buyer like Bob to make decisions. You can cup the coffee before you're producing it. But then once you have it, and everyone does that, right, for the most part, at least at a professional level, I would imagine most people are cupping their coffee before they purchase it. At least I hope so. But I think one of the things that sets Batdorf apart is that we're consistently checking our work, consistently cupping that coffee, doing the production cuppings, making sure that we're tweaking and making changes, because maybe you can speak to this, but the coffee doesn't roast the same the whole season, right?
Yeah. Coffee, generally speaking, is a single harvest that occurs in a crop cycle. And if it's coffee that we've decided we want to have all the time, there are times where that coffee could potentially be in our warehouses for 9 months. So yeah, over that time, the green coffee can change. We do things to help mitigate that, like store it in grain pro bags. We ask at origin if they can put it in grain pro bags, which will help preserve the quality of that coffee. There are times where, the moisture content shouldn't change too much, but the cup itself it can start to get a little aged tasted. And there's things that we can do as a roaster to help mitigate that. Obviously, if the coffee goes beyond that, then it's not the quality we're looking for, and we don't sell it. So,
Right.
But yeah, and things like not the coffee itself, but just the weather, right? A day
Sure.
that it might be high humidity versus a day that it's really dry and hot. It's going to affect how the machine performs. Barometric pressure, right? I mean, there were times where I could tell that the barometer was dropping and a storm was coming, and it was just like the machine had a little tougher time pushing air out the stack. So there are variables there that as a roaster person, we like to think we can help mitigate and just keep the end result consistent with what it was you did yesterday.
Right. I imagine that's a big difference just between, roasting in both Olympia, Washington, and in Atlanta. Just the weather being so drastically different.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the reasons we do roaster person exchanges, where we'll have employees go back and forth, and it's good educational opportunity to have people do this on different pieces of equipment, and it helps the person, and it also ultimately builds your skills to the point where you can kind of have a much more intimate relationship with the product that you're working with, and make decisions that will help quality in the end.
I've definitely seen a few baristas choke when you take them off of their home espresso machine. So I think there's a correlation there.
Different, yeah.
So we're almost we're about 14 minutes in here, so I should be able to
That's
more
my
or less
magic
able
number
to.
right there. 14 minutes.
What's that?
I said that's my magic number. 14 minutes.
14 minutes.
That's
So
when I know it's good to go.
I'm gonna taste some of this coffee. I always need more containers than I think I'm gonna need, and I do it all the time. I already dirtied that one up too much. I want another rinse. So I'm gonna just cup this here.
All right, so just so I know, and anyone that's watching knows, so you have, do you have 4 samples there? You have 2 samples of natural, one that's done in the home roaster, one that's done in our production machine, and you have 2 samples of the washed Burundi as well, one that's done in the home roaster, and one that's done in our production machine.
That's right.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, I've got thoughts. Okay. It's not even close. My air popper is the new way to roast coffee. No, I'm just kidding. The coffee, you didn't see that twist coming. The coffee that was roasted on the professional equipment is light years better. And specifically, I think what I'm tasting is more control and more balance, right? The elements are still there in the home roasted version, but I think this natural is delicious, right? The one I'm having here that was roasted at Batdorf. It's sweet and it's tangy, and it's it's certainly fruity, but it's just really well balanced. It leaves me with a little something on my tongue, but like it's just very pleasant. And whereas the version that I did of the same coffee, it's flat, it's lacking all of the dynamics that the other one had. And then worse than that, it's more sour. So it's like the worst of all worlds. I've lost that sort of dynamic thing. I always think of tasting coffee like a roller coaster, you know? You start off with one thing and then it kind of moves and then you sort of finish a certain way. And ideally, all of that is pleasant, right? Or if you have something that's interesting and challenging, maybe you finish in a place that's less overwhelming so that your palate can kind of handle it. And naturals can do that, right? Naturals can be challenging on the palate. They can create a little more adventure.
And you know,
but man,
I'm obviously not tasting the coffees you have in front of you, but I think, describing something as flat and less complex and less dynamic doesn't sound too bad to me, considering some of the experiences I've had with the home roasters they often have just kind of a corny, like real astringent quality to them that, it's a lack of sweetness and a lack of flavor development, or it just tastes burnt. It just tastes like the edges. You mentioned it being really fast, the roast time being really fast. And usually that can translate to a little scorching. The heat is such that it's really kind of hitting the outside of the bean hard and underdeveloping the inside of the bean. And that can be that sort of sour. But like I said, sometimes it can be just, it can be a little corny tasting and burnt tasting.
And it probably the first batch I roasted would have. I just looked at it and couldn't cup it. So I was being really, really conservative pulling this coffee.
Yeah.
As soon as I got through that first crack, I pulled it. And that was the only thing I knew to do, right? I knew I couldn't develop it anymore without scorching the coffee. There's just no
and I think,
way.
you know, from a roasting standpoint, a lot happens fast once you get beyond first crack, right?
Right.
You spend a lot of time going through what we call the drying phase, and then time to kind of move that coffee along to first crack. And then once you get to first crack, to pyrolysis, or to when that water that's trapped in that green coffee starts to turn to steam or vaporize, things will happen fast. And if you lack control on your machine, it just gets exacerbated. So I think that's kind of what you were experiencing. And yeah, you can pull it out of there when you pulled it out of there, but then you're probably going to have some of those sort of sour, underdeveloped flavors. And a lot of people tell me, you know, well, dark roasting coffee, you're just masking the flavor. And that's absolutely true. You can mask flavor when you dark roast coffee. You start tasting more roast than you're going to taste in the green coffee itself. I would say you can mask flavor by roasting coffee too light. You know, you just have that sort of green, sort of sour flavor, and you haven't quite developed some of those sugars that need to be developed. So it's definitely a two-way street.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's definitely my takeaways. I could not roast this with enough control to pull out of it all the potential that was there.
Yeah.
And if I'd gone longer, I would have been on the other side of it. You know, I tell people all the time, if you're going to, whatever you're going to do, start with good green and then roast it with care and you're fine. You know, if you like something a little on the light side or a little on the dark side, that's great. Just don't roast to compensate for buying a poor quality coffee. And I love that all of the coffee that Batdorf carries is at that highest quality level, so that we can just roast it to its full potential and know that we're going to have a really good version of that coffee. We have I brought a customer on as a wholesale who was a roaster, right, recently. And he told me about his experience with roasting. He went out and he bought some equipment, spent some money, practiced, put up the website, started selling the stuff, and then realized that, number one, he couldn't control his roast as well as he thought he could. And so he would just waste coffee and end up with really poor results. But number two, he didn't really have as much control over his green as he would have liked. So he got some green that was just subs quality. You know, he had some theories as to what was wrong with it, but he ended up kind of dumping the whole thing and refunding people's money and then switching over and carrying our coffee, because he kind of learned that lesson the hard way, that there's a lot that goes into sourcing good coffee well, and there's a lot that goes into then roasting that well. And, you know, even though it's not hard to come by green coffee, you can get online and get it. It is hard to come by the kind of green and the relationships and the know-how that you, Bob, and the rest of the team have to ensure that year after year, month after month, that quality level is always as high as it possibly can be.
Yeah. There's varying levels of, it's like anything else in this world. You can buy the best produce you've ever seen, or you can get the scratch and dent sale, right? So, and you know, I will say that, like we started out this conversation with, you know, you have the little air popper there. Mm-hmm. There are other home roasters that you will have more control with, but like everything else in this world, you get what you pay for, right? So
For sure.
I don't know how much they cost. They're not cheap. And how is it a hobby? Is it a business? You know, what's your goal?
Right.
But ultimately, at the end of the day, if you want to have a great cup of coffee, then yeah, maybe your best bet is to just call up a professional coffee roaster. You know,
Yeah.
I want a professional mechanic working on my car. Okay,
For sure.
That's all I'm gonna say. I could probably, you know, get through a brake job, but I would prefer, especially if I knew, you know, my wife or kids were going to go out and drive that car, to have the professional mechanic do the maintenance on it.
And Bob, out of the days that you're roasting, how often are you cupping coffee in the roastery?
Yeah. So me personally, obviously not so much
team.
now because So, but we are cupping every roast that we put through our machine. So we have our daily production cupping. It's usually the coffees that were roasted the day before. All that coffee's already packaged and out the door. So it's not necessarily quality control. I mean, it is quality control, but it's consistency control. If there was anything wrong with that coffee, it would have been recognized either during the roast or prior to that when we were doing our real quality control in the lab before we put these coffees into the production environment. So, but yeah, every roast that goes through our machine gets tasted by somebody.
And that doesn't happen with every roaster.
I don't know, but I
can tell you
guess.
for sure that I know that it doesn't happen with every roaster.
Yeah.
And it makes a difference because, you know, you take something like Dancing Goat's Blend, the coffee that we've had for forever, and without a doubt, you're going to know if it's a little off or something's awry. You know that so well. You're so familiar with it that you're going to be able to recognize any changes that need to be made to maintain that consistency or to ensure that that quality is always at that level that it should be. And that's why we have customers that have been serving that same coffee for, 20 plus years.
Yeah.
Without issue. And that's the kind of thing that when you're developing a coffee where you're not hiding things, you're bringing them out, everything's on display. So you either do it right or you don't do it right.
Yeah.
So I think that makes it.
And I think something, just a constant reminder, and I'm always talking to people about this, is, this is coffee. This is an agricultural product. So
Right.
There are going to be differences and there are going to be changes, and there's not one formula or one recipe that you can just plug in a machine, push a button and go and expect to get the same results every time.
That's right.
Any chef that's dealing with ingredients knows that those ingredients aren't always the same all the time, and you need to be able to work with it and make it work for you. So, and that's the job that we really do task our roasting staff with, and they do a wonderful job at it.
Yeah, for sure. They're amazing. I like that it's really that personal care that they know the smell, they know the look, they know the sound. They're paying attention to that process to make sure that that the quality is achieved. You can't. It is like cooking, right? You can't just follow a recipe blindly and expect that your oven's the same as someone else's oven, right? Or whatever the case may be, that your cut of salmon is the same as somebody else's. So cool. Well, this is really enlightening, Bob. Thank you for taking the time to chat.
Glad you had your experience. And
I am too.
well, hey,
But
Brendan, it's Friday, so
yeah,
it's almost it's got to be getting close to beer 30 in St. Pete's.
it's close. It's getting close. Well, it's good to see you, Bob. Thank you for hanging out with
All
us.
right.
And
Yeah, have a good weekend, and I'm sure we'll be in touch soon.
And I'll just say for anybody that's watching the video, in case I don't figure out how to record something else and amend it to it, if you want to pick up some coffee, you can go to our website, which is batdorfcoffee.com, and we'll send a bag of the Burundi or whatever other coffee you want to buy right to your door. All right. Cool. See you later.
See ya.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. Thanks for those of you that hung out with us. Take my microphone off mute. I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. Thank you for all of you who hung out with us. I hope that you got something out of it. I know that I did. Again, we've got that coupon on screen for you, Watch and Learn 10, so you can save 10% off of any coffee purchase today. I'll show you again the coffees I'm loving this week. Our Dancing Goats blend and our Costa Rica La Manita Tarasu. Both really, really excellent coffees, and we've got those available for you with that special coupon, 10% off. Watch and Learn 10 at batdorfcoffee.com. And don't forget to join the Batdorf Boosters VIP Coffee Club, the only place to get an even better discount, along with the opportunity to hang out with fellow coffee lovers, post your morning mugshot, get information about new coffees, ask questions and get answers. That's the Batdorf Boosters VIP Coffee Club. Thanks again for tuning in. And we'll see you soon. Take care now.